In the world of mid-sized prestige cars, there's a pretty well-established group, a gang of four if you like. There's the Audi A4 and the BMW 3 Series, both very well-known quantities. The Lexus IS has been around for a while too, but this car, unlike previous versions, doesn't have the normally aspirated V6. This has a petrol-electric hybrid driveline, so that's interesting. But the car that potentially could turn this whole lot on its head the most is this car, the new Mercedes C200, part of the new C-Class range. In some respects, it's a bit of the old. It's rear-wheel drive still, and it still uses a turbocharged four-cylinder petrol engine. But in other ways, in terms of its packaging and what you get for your money, this could be a game changer. It's going to alter expectations. Buyers in this market are going to be saying, well, what's normal anymore? And when you start to ask questions like that, it's time to go for a drive. In the Lexus IS300h, the hybrid layout, or the driveline, does impose its own little idiosyncrasies. The braking feel is quite artificial, and you can almost pick the point where it switches from regenerative braking to the actual brake pads. And the CVT is going to take a lot of getting used to for people. It spins the engine up hard, right up into its efficiency zone, even though the car's then got to catch up, and it feels very strange the first few times you do it. And some people don't like it, they never get used to it, and I think I might be one of those too. But the ride's quite good, other than the fact that there's a little bit too much impact harshness. I think they could go a little bit softer on the spring and still get a decent result. The payoff though is that the front end's really, really accurate. This car is a great steering car, as Lexus ISs always have been. So regardless of what you might think about the driveline and the CVT transmission, it really isn't a bad car to drive. It's quite entertaining, and because of the electric motor, it's got good step off from the lights, and it's actually got a fair bit of torque for going up hills. So even though you are working the CVT, unless you're right into the power band and right up the car, it doesn't actually feel that foreign.
The Lexus IS300h is a $59,500 car, and with the electric motor and petrol engine combined, it can create 164 kilowatts of power.
Well, the minute you jump into the BMW after the Lexus, the big impression is how much classier this thing is inside. I'm not sure what it is about the Lexus, it just feels a little bit down market in this company. I guess in isolation it's not so bad, but when you're talking about three upmarket German cars, you've got to be on your game interior-wise. And I think it falls behind a little bit. The BMW feels very wide from the minute you set off, and I'm not sure why that is, because it's probably not any wider than the others in outright terms, but it just has that sort of almost as if it's carrying its weight high feel to it, and it doesn't really upset the car. It still hangs on very well, but it means that you don't really feel quite so planted on the road as you do with the others. Now, I'm talking nth degree stuff here. It's still an incredibly secure car to drive. It just doesn't seem to have quite the driver involvement that I was expecting. The steering's a little bit inaccurately, not the word, but it just lacks that little bit of involvement right at the 100% mark. And the engine, although it's very sweet and smooth and it does a good job, you can feel that it doesn't have the torque of, say, the Mercedes, or definitely not the Audi. The 8-speed gearbox does mask that a little bit, but as a result, it works the gearbox very hard. And when you're having a bit of a play, it's up and down the gearbox all the time, which is no real hardship, because it is a beautiful 8-speed unit. But you can tell that the car you're driving in this instance doesn't have quite the same sportiness and not quite the same driver appeal as some of the others.
The BMW 320i costs $60,500 plus on-road costs. Its 135 kilowatt engine makes 270 newton meters of torque also.
The Audi A4 is definitely not the newest design of this 4. In fact, it's a bit of a granddad. But for me, it was the real surprise of the pack. Cornering's very flat, the ride's very quiet, the steering's not too bad. I mean, it's not quite as good, I would say, as the Lexus or the Benz, but this is definitely the driver's choice, this car, and that's purely because of that thermonuclear device under the bonnet. This thing really gets up and goes. The 7-speed gearbox works really well with it. It really is a lot of fun. The all-wheel drive really gives it another dimension too, and on the greasy roads that we're on this afternoon, and it is just about snowing up here, it hangs on like nobody's business. It's the car you would take to the snow, and it's also the car of these 4 that you would take for a Sunday morning blat. Now, that's probably 5-10% of your life. The other 90%, well, The ride's not quite as good. I don't think it's got the standard equipment that some people are looking for in this market. You don't, for instance, get a reverse camera, and you still have to put a key in the dashboard. But so, you know, there's all those things to consider. It is a little bit cheaper to buy, but overall, I think there are better equipped cars at the money. And one of those cars is the C200, which we'll try next.
The Audi A4 costs $59,900 plus on-road costs and makes 165 kilowatts and, crucially, 350 newton meters of torque from its 2-litre turbocharged engine.
Okay, so here we are in the C200 Mercedes-Benz. This is the car everybody's talking about. This is the car everybody wants to know about. In outright engine performance terms, I'd put it just below the Audi and just above the other two. In terms of its handling, probably ditto. But this does have very accurate steering, and it has the best ride of any of these cars here. By a fair margin, actually. It's also the quietest, it's the most spacious interior. In fact, if you take a tape measure to this car, it's all but as big in every direction inside as a mid-90s E-Class Mercedes. So that's how good the packaging is.
The Mercedes-Benz C200 is a $60,900 car, so it is the most expensive, but only by a little bit. And its 2-litre engine makes 135 kilowatts and 300 newton meters.
So what's the upshot? What's the clincher with all this? Well, for me, and a lot of people like me, it comes down to a very important safety issue. Everybody's talking about autonomous braking these days, or crash avoidance technology, and it does have the potential to be a lifesaver. And crucially, every car in the Mercedes C-Class range, including the C200, has autonomous braking as standard. In the Lexus, you've got to option up a $14,000 package, which includes sunroof and parking sensors, and so that kind of puts it out of reach for most people. In the Audi, you've got to package it with a $1,300 option pack, and in the BMW, there's a sort of a version of autonomous braking linked with the cruise control, but it won't bring the car to a complete stop in the case of something in front of you that you haven't seen at city speeds. So this is the only car that's got it as standard, and I think really, in terms of the fact that it's really no more expensive than the others in every other regard, I think that kind of wraps it up for the Benz. I think the fact that this car's got autonomous braking is going to be a game changer in this market segment. Pretty soon, if you haven't got it, you won't be in the race, and that's probably no bad thing. I would put the Audi a very close second, and if for someone who's a keener driver, particularly if it's somebody who's a ski enthusiast and goes to the snowfields every now and then I think the Audi A4 could edge this car out because it's very sure-footed and it's got the best engine and gearbox package. The Lexus, I'm not so sure about in terms of its overall appeal to a bloke like me. Hybrid technology, I think, and I've said it before, is a stopgap. It's potentially very good, and it works quite well and reasonably seamlessly in the Lexus, but I'm not convinced that I would spend the money for a car with a hybrid driveline. The BMW, look, the 328i is one of my favourite medium prestige cars ever, but I just think the 320i, that loss of performance really plays against that car, and it takes it from something that's very relaxed and entertained into something that feels like it's trying too hard most of the time. So that's where we're at. I'll give it to the C200 with the A4 a very commendable second.